Welcome everyone to our session 2 outbreak session. So this session we're all in now is the Connect for Children, Planning Together for Children's Wellbeing. So we've got our presenters Kerri and Melissa. So I'll hand it over to Melissa to start us off.
Thanks, Pamela, and thanks for being there as our support person while we're doing something new. Hi, everyone. I hope you've had a great morning. It's a bit weird doing it all from the comfort of your own home or your own workplace, as Kerri and I are, but we appreciate the opportunity to be able to connect with everybody today. There's a small group of us, so hopefully we'll be able to have a little bit of interaction. It's not quite the workshop we had planned, but we'll do our best. Okay. Oh, I was going to say, Kerri, now it's really wheeling through for me. I couldn't get it to turn.
I didn't touch it, Melissa.
I'm controlling Kerri's desktop, and before she started just flying through them on me, so I didn't know what was happening. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting today. I'm sitting on Giebel and Jarawar country here in Toowoomba at the top of the range. And I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging from wherever you are as well, sitting, I know there's some people who aren't even in Queensland, so from wherever you are in Queensland, Australia, or if you're overseas as well. The work that we're doing is really about connecting to country, to communities, to the elders in our communities, and to learn from the people who really know the experiences in that location. And I really appreciated Nicole's insights this morning through the Welcome to Country, and really thinking about what it means to stamp your foot and hold your heart and really whoosh in all directions to think about where we are and why we're doing the work that we're doing. A really big part of the work that we've done in the area I'm from is the Let's Yarn About Kindy campaign in Toowoomba and Cunnamulla, where we work through place-based approaches to design a promotional campaign based on the voices of people who lived in that community, which is a really powerful connection to community for us. Kerri is in Brisbane. I'll let her talk about the land she's on today.
I'm on Turrbal land and Wanya, everybody. Wanya in Turrbal language means welcome.
I love the way you do that, Kerri. Thank you. As a small group, can we just quickly do a rip around and say where you are today? Pamela, we'll start with you.
So I'm on Drumble land, so Guramuli is hello here.
Thank you. Kathy O'Sullivan.
I'm in Queensland, Turrbal land as well.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Tracy, you're next on my screen. I think you're on mute still, Tracy.
Sorry,
That's all right.
I'm up at Bribie Island.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for being with us. Anne? Sorry, Anne. I think I saw you were off mute, but somehow it went back on.
Am I good now?
You're good.
I'm in Brisbane.
Oh, nice. Lots of Brisbane people today. Naomi, what about you? Yagra land in Ipswich. Thank you, Naomi. Michelle? Tannum Sands, beautiful. A lot warmer than where I am today. Debbie, how about you?
Coomanberry from Burleigh Heads, Yugonbear language.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm getting jealous of all the beach goers and warmer climes. I'm not sure who Encrew, sorry. That's okay. Melissa Curran? Or Melissa DeCoyne, I think there's somebody else. And from Tannum Sands as well. Thank you very much. If anybody else didn't get a chance to say where you're from today, you can put that into the chat box. Thank you for having us. Kerri and I are both from the Department of Education. We both led the Connect for Children strategy in its early days. So we've been invited to present on behalf of the department, but we acknowledge that this is shared work. across the Department of Education, across all of our regions, but also across departments, communities, ECEC services, schools and non-government organisations. And it's through this collective approach that we're looking to advance Queensland's priorities, and in particular we're focusing on this commitment from the Queensland Government, which is about giving all our children a great start. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the plan for advancing Queensland priorities, this giving all our children a great start has 3 indicators: to increase the number of babies born healthier, to increase childhood immunisation rates, and to improve wellbeing prior to school. And the contribution that we're making through Connect for Children is really strongly focused on improving wellbeing prior to school, but we'll connect across each of those targets as we go along in this work. So the way that we're going to be measuring success to know whether we have given all children a great start and improved wellbeing prior to school is to look at the AEDC data. And we have a big call to action that really needs shared responses, shared responsibility and collective action. Because by 2025, we want to reduce the percentage of Queensland children developmentally vulnerable on 1 or more domains of the AEDC to 22%. We started off with when the AEDC first started in 2009 in Queensland at a vulnerability rate of 29.6. And at that point in time, our vulnerability rate was, and it still is, one of the highest in Australia. We did make a significant reduction. This was in Australia, sorry. No, hang on, Kerri, I've gotten confused. This is Queensland's.
Queensland.
Hang on, where did we have the kindy effect? We had a significant reduction from 2009 to 2012, reducing that vulnerability to 26.2%. And there's lots of attention as to how we got that level of population shift in Queensland. And one of the hypotheses behind that is looking at the impact of the kindergarten effect, where we increased kindergarten participation significantly over this period. So we've had slight reductions in the years since, but we haven't been able to get that same level of population effect. And we know that people are working hard in everything they're doing to improve outcomes for children, but we're not getting the population shift that we need. So we're trying to really shift that trajectory quickly over the next few years. And we're heading into the 2021 collection next year, where we're aiming to reduce that vulnerability. And then by 2024 collection, with the release of data in 2025 being 22%. So we really need to work together. And to guide some of that decision making about what planning looks like in communities, we will continue to use the AEDC as a conversation starter in the data. When we first put forward this presentation, there was an AEDC presentation as well as ours, and we were asked to combine the two. So I just want to do if you can have a look at your reactions down on your screen, if you can give me a hands up if you have heard of the AEDC. Thumbs up, that's a good one, Kathy, thank you. Great. If you've heard of the AEDC, have you collected the data? And if you've heard of the AEDC, thank you. And if you've heard of the AEDC, have you used the AEDC to respond at your local service or in your local community? Right, okay, great. I was wondering how quickly we would skip through this section. So that's great to know that it's a good idea for us to go over some of this information. And the same teams that are looking after Connect for Children in a region are also able to offer training in the AEDC as well. So they're very strongly connected. So the Australian Early Development Census is a snapshot of young children's development from across Australian communities at the time they start school. It was based on the Early Development Index from Canada, and we adapted it to Australian conditions, and we collect it in Queensland in prep. It happens between May and June, and prep teachers just base their decisions when they complete the survey on their observations over time. They won't complete the survey if the child's only been at the school for a month, so it does for less than a month, so it does rely on them having some knowledge of the child. There's availability of cultural consultants to make sure that the judgments are being made through the lens of the child's cultural background as well. So it's a snapshot of the population. It's not scored by individual children, scored for individual children. It's designed to, it gathers information on individual children, but only reports it at a school level, and that's a confidential report for every school, at a community level, and then at higher levels, so Queensland and Australian data as well. And it's designed not to diagnose or give us certainty about the way forward, but to stimulate those conversations and to bring partners together. There's 5 domains of the AEDC: physical health and wellbeing, social competence, emotional maturity, language and cognitive skills, which is literacy, numeracy and memory, not the oral language skills. They sit over in communication skills and general knowledge. And it's actually not any one domain that should also drive our responses in communities. It's really about what wraps around child development across those domains. And we know that that's why we're using the indicator of reducing developmental vulnerability on one or more domains, because it's actually about the protective factors and the accumulation of risk factors that wrap around the way that children develop and learn in the early years. And I did miss Karen's session. I saw her early this morning session, but I did miss her session on child development in the last session. So if anybody went, you can jump in, take your microphone off mute and present this. But we know that the way that children develop and learn in the early years is a complex interaction between their genes, the environment, and even when we're in the environment, sorry, it's about all those layers of what wraps around a child. It's their family, their peers and their kinship networks, the community and the broader environment. And we know, sorry, that there's protective factors and risk factors that can impact on their development. And one of the interesting things that we really need to look at when we're looking at the AEDC is that it's not about looking at risk and deficits, and it's not looking at matching those together when we're looking at the sort of shifts and changes we want to make for children. It's about the conditions that exist for them in a community. And we know that protective factors have a stronger influence on child development and learning outcomes long term than focusing on one single risk factor in isolation. To have a significant impact or to have a known impact on child development, there needs to be an accumulation of those risk factors over time. So it's an interesting space. So kindy participation, I didn't ask where everybody's from in terms of their work, but we know that kindy participation, stable families, structures, attachment, which Karen just was so fantastic at explaining this morning, and accessible services, all of those protective factors are really what we're looking at when we're looking at the AEDC data and when we're looking at our Connect for Children community responses. We know that everybody online knows that the first 5 years matter and last a lifetime, and that these risk factors and protective factors actually have such long-term implications. It's not just about starting school, and we do a lot in our work to really reframe that idea of readiness. It's about having a really happy, healthy and productive life throughout your whole life and across all parts of your life, which is why we try to lift that thinking from just the risk factors and the developmental domains as well. So when Kerri and I were looking at the Connect for Children strategy, and probably people higher than us, Kerri, would you say, we're looking at the Connect for Children strategy when it was first formed, we were really looking at the evidence base about what shifts populations. And what they've found through the AEDC and through other long-term longitudinal studies of early child development and its lifetime outcomes is that there are some really key factors that need to be embedded in your approach if you're going to shift that population. You need to have a knowledge of the mechanisms that are holding a problem in place. And we speak a lot about the conditions for children. What is it in this community that's really creating these outcomes for children? And it's bigger than a service. It's bigger than not having health checks. It's bigger than that. It's then the big ability to address these mechanisms, and it's sustained effort over time. So when we look at WA's data, they've got some of the most significant population shift in Australia. over the lifetime of the AEDC. And what they found in WA is that it's consistency of raising awareness of the early childhood story. It is saturation of messaging, of knowing what matters most in the early years. It's stacking and layering of approaches. So when I said before about health isn't all that matters, health checks aren't all that matter, they are important, but how does that fit in with other wraparounds for that family, for that child? And that it's that shared long-term commitment as well in that location. So we know then that we can look to the AEDC data to help drive some of this change. And again, it doesn't have the solutions, but it can help with prompting questions to identify factors that impact on development. It can help us look to what works, where this has worked, and how to act early, and how to match reach and dosage based on those different strategies that have been tried and shown that they work. And it also helps us look at those impacts and efforts over time as well. So it's a powerful tool, but also know that it isn't the silver bullet. We need to actually look at the AEDC data with other data that exists in that community. And that might be, you know, service data, it might be achievement data, but really importantly, it might be information about from that voice of children and that voice of families that really tells us about the mechanisms that hold problems in place and the ideas for what actually might address these mechanisms. What's it like to have a baby in this community? What's it like to have children in this community who are 2, who are 3? And what is it that would help you break down those barriers as a family? So from that evidence base, the Connect for Children strategy was born. And the Connect for Children strategy is looking at place-based approaches, is working through place-based approaches to develop birth to 5 plans. So in a place-based approach, we're investing in partnerships that are focused on the early years. And we're doing that to identify local solutions to local priorities. We're not doing it to find out what's not, you know, what the deficits are and to fill those gaps. We're really wanting to get down to those local solutions to local priorities that are identified through local voice and through multiple perspectives. And then we want to capture those local priorities and local solutions in birth to 5 plans. And our hypothesis is that will improve the wellbeing of children prior to school and give all children a great start. I'll stop there for a second. Any questions about the AEDC and how it connects to Connect for Children? Great, I've got you all on my side screen, so sorry, I keep turning sideways to look at you. So some of the really strong foundations for the Connect for Children strategy, which I've already probably said, but I will say it again, is that it's child, family and community perspectives will drive the decision making about the priorities and next steps, and that will capture that in a birth to 5 plan. There isn't a template, and it's the idea that we don't have to fill anything in. It's not about communities, you know, going through a rigorous paper-based process, but it's about capturing the conversations, the agreements and the actions, and how is that done in that community. The department won't own the birth to 5 plans, and we've said to government that and this took a lot of bravery, didn't it, Kerri, to say that we may never see the birth to 5 plan. It just may be that we are the holders, are the representatives of the birth to 5 plan that's held in that community. So we have to be able to partner well enough to be able to capture that, to send it forward. The strategy is really about small wins between big goals. We know this work takes time. Kerri and I have been working in this space for at least 6 years, and probably in other roles in the same sort of way. But we know that the birth to 5 plans are going to take time to develop, and that to get them, we'll have something on the table that community can agree with or disagree with. So you've got, so that you have something that you can discuss as a community. But we know that over time it will change, and we'll get closer and closer to what those mechanisms are and those conditions are that need to change or be built on over time. And we know we won't have the silver bullet early. So we really want to recognise small wins that reflect the stage of the place-based approach. And what's we find really different in this space as well is that when communities are coming up with these plans, that we've made a commitment across the Queensland Government and the Department of Education to partner in a different way and be responsive to Birth to 5 plans, so that we'll have service agreements with the programs we fund that actually say, well, the community wants this, so now you have to deliver it. Whole of government will work together to say, how can we do business differently together because this community has said this is what they need. And our Deputy Director General came to visit Tara with me this week in the region I live in. And it's such a genuine commitment that when she heard what the priorities were in that community and what might make a difference through that voice of community, she was straight on the phone and was trying to make that happen. So it's not all about communities making their local priorities and local solutions work either. There's going to be that wraparound support. And the people who broker that support are the partnerships facilitators early years. They're there not to run a place-based approach or develop the Birth to 5 plan. They're there to enable your place-based approaches in priority locations and improve the wellbeing prior to school. And they'll continue to also work in early learning pathways. So looking at access to playgroup, kindergarten, and supporting successful transitions, which is the work that this team has always done, just under a different name. So if you don't know your partnerships facilitator early years, we have got a link for your regional contacts, and get in touch. They're a great bunch. We've got about 38 across the state at the moment. And 16 of those are permanent positions, so we'll have those positions long term. The strategy works through 4 strategic platforms. We have a focus on places, and they're the locations that are focused on early years priorities across Queensland. We have 102 priority locations at the moment, not 102 partnerships facilitators. We have 102 priority locations, and those locations have been picked based on a combination of data, on people being early adopters and having some great leverage, and based on buy-in in that community. 14 of these locations have got an even deeper focus that's got a whole of government focus throughout the different layers of government. So we call those our reporting locations. To find out the priority locations near you, again, you can contact the partnerships facilitator in your area. We are working through place-based approaches, and if you haven't seen it before, we're using the QCOS guide and toolkit for place-based approaches for community change, and it's a great resource, and we can't acknowledge the work that QCOS has done in this space as leaders in this space enough. It is a great guidebook that any of you could go and access and dig in and help build your understanding of what a place-based approach is if you're interested in that. We won't go deeply into that today. The second platform is partnerships, and that's where it's really looking at local community and services working together to improve the wellbeing of children. And Kerri, early on in this work, was at a Children's Health Queensland and Education forum where Frank Tracy said, we cannot do this work alone. If we're really going to shift the population, if we're going to give all children a great start, that we really need to all take up our ethical, social and economic responsibility to partner together to ensure our children flourish, and that's got a long-term view. So we really acknowledge that in our work. So have a think, and in the chat box, have a think about how do you directly influence children's wellbeing prior to school? So think about, are you working with children in an ECEC service in a school? Are you working with children in any other way? I don't know if you can see that because I don't know if I'm on Kerri's screen when I've hit that. Can you see the chat box?
I can't see the chat box, Melissa, but I'll just listen.
I don't know if anybody's put anything in there, but I couldn't see anything when I just had a quick look. Thank you, Melissa. Building safe and secure connections at kindergarten. Great. That's a really important partnership. The ECEC serve playgroups, influencing wellbeing. I don't know if I've missed that next word. Empowering parents. That was, I like the way that came across, Naomi. And this, I think that's a really great segue, Naomi, into the next question I was going to ask. A lot of us will have a direct influence with children, and we know the influence we have, that quality that we provide in our interactions with the children every day. And again, with that attachment that we make in the services that we deliver. How do we connect with the people that have the most influence on children's wellbeing prior to school? And Naomi, I think that's exactly it. It's around that empowering parents. How do we really enable them and know their story, know where they are, and know what the next thing is that they might need? So based on those things that you already do, you've already got a great opportunity to connect with children and families. What's the one thing you could do, I was going to say differently, or one of the things that you could do to more deeply in these connections, or with other connections that you know also wrap around children, to make a difference in the wellbeing of children prior to school? And you can either say it out loud, take your phone off, take your speaker off mute, or you could put it in the chat box. I'll wait and see if anything comes up in those chat boxes as people are thinking. But I think it's, you know, some of the work, thank you, Melissa, encouraging consistent family engagement in the program. And that's a really, I think, some of the work that we've seen in priority locations across the state. So in Lockhart River, their focus coming from the voice of elders has been that they really want to look at the full range of how families are supported in their community. What does family support look like in the home? What does family support look like in the ECEC service? What does in the early years place there? And how does that get built across all different parts of the community? Providing children with a safe, welcoming and inviting families to be involved in their children's learning. And one of the key parts of this work is looking at quality and ensuring that there's quality in ECEC services, and really looking at that quality area 6 and that sense of belonging for children and families. Looking at the skills to be happy and enthusiastic learners, asking for feedback and being able to implement it. That's really important, Pamela, that voice of being able for people to be able to contribute and then to be able to respond. Providing children with the tools for building resilience. Kathy, I was thinking that this morning the whole time that she was talking. I was like, wow, this is just such a powerful focus that she spoke about this morning, with anxiety, resilience, attachment. And I thought we haven't actually seen that come through in any birth to 5 plans, and we're in the early days, but we haven't seen that yet. So I thought that was interesting. Providing information and possible solutions that is non-biased and inclusive, supporting stress time for families in a practical way. And again, even though I said that there's that example of family wellbeing and support, it hasn't been a huge focus as yet. We know that our lens of that early learning pathways is still driving a lot of the early birth to 5 plans, but we're really looking forward to having people like you at the table and saying to drive thinking differently and holistically about what else families and children need, because you guys know what children and families really experience on a daily basis. At a system level, we say we can see the kindy data is low, or we can see not enough transition statements are shared, or families are bouncing back from prep to kindy, and that's not good, so it must be the transition practices. And we'll be addressing our system issues, and we'll be trying to encourage that voice of children and families, but it's the partners in community who bring that to the table. So you've got great knowledge, please bring that knowledge to the table in the communities that you can work in. I'm going really quickly because I'm handing over to Kerri now, but the next part really connects to what you were all talking about. It's about getting to that precision. It's about bringing all of those voices together, bringing all of those perspectives and bringing the voices of children, families, service providers and other members of community together to get to agreed priorities and evidence-informed next steps. And that's what's captured in the Birth to 5 plan. The plans over time will have components of a vision, governance agreements that represent the different ways that partners are involved. Not everybody needs to be at the core of a partnership in a community, but everybody should be able to find a place, even if it's just the person who, I'm that person in a community. I sort of sit at the edges, not always boots in. Goals, and then the reviewing and reporting mechanisms will be reflected in that place-based approach. Kerri, I have seen that your team has done a great draft to a Birth to 5 plan, and we've got some emerging Birth to 5 plans, but it's quite new and they all look very different. But what matters is that it captures the voice of that community. I've just put up here an example from work pre-Connect for Children, led by Children's Health Queensland and partnered in with our department and council and a whole range of stakeholders. The mum from the soccer club, who's also the speechie, they came up with this 4610 Partnerships for Kids, and they over time developed their vision, exactly all their steps, their governance agreements, came up with their priorities. This was just the note taking from a meeting that was made to look neater, looking at these are all the different parts that we want to focus on, and everybody broke up into working groups. And then from that work, they came together with their Birth to 5 plan. So a Birth to 5 plan can be a post-it note on a wall and we take a photo of it. But again, it's that agreement that's what really matters. And then just so that you know, particularly as educators, that pathways are still vitally important to this work. It's just that they don't have to be the driving factor. They don't have to be the first thing that we focus on in a community, but we still provide that support for early learning pathways, including playgroup and transitions. So it's about exactly all those things you've just said, providing opportunities to access quality kindy for all kids, and knowing the different groups in your community that might not be accessing, and working through innovative ways in your community that you can make that happen. Looking at increasing the quality of all services and looking at workforce strategies as well. Engaging families, as we've all said, supporting culturally responsive learning, building resilience and supporting our transitions. So the work that you do is critical to the work of Connect for Children. And we really will value your partnerships in any way you can connect. There's more information about the strategy online, and you can also contact your local regional office to find out more about how you can work together with the partnerships facilitator and other partners in your community, and to find out where those priority locations are. Any questions before I hand over to Kerri, who's going to talk about an example of Connect for Children in practice, even before Connect for Children existed. So any questions? I am handing over to Kerri.
Thanks so much, Melissa. I was just going to ask Melissa, I've got a bit of a grid showing with participants. Is that showing up on your screen, or is it okay? Excellent. Sorry, I just didn't want to block the transmission, the presentation for everybody. All right, so I'm going to talk about Bramble Bay, and I want to preface this by saying that this is just one example. When Melissa and I were seconded into central office from our regions to conceptualise and pull all the threads together, what we did was looked at research from right across Queensland, best practice from right across Queensland, where communities had been plugging away at improving the wellbeing of children prior to school. And there were examples in every region across Queensland of this. And so the Connect for Children strategy is really based on what was already occurring, and what we wanted to do was broaden the scope and make sure that we were all doing work in a similar way. So Bramble Bay was one example. And so you were all sitting there probably going, where the hell is Bramble Bay? Because most people don't connect this part of the country as being Bramble Bay. I'll just show you. So on a map of Queensland, we have metropolitan region, which is this tiny little speck down here. And you can see where Melissa is currently the Director of Darling Downs Southwest. So we're small in geographical size, but very large in terms of population. So Bramble Bay is this bit. It's sitting within metropolitan region, but it really goes from Pine Rivers in the north down almost as far as Clayfield. Some of our partners are in that suburb, but it's really centred around the Sandgate, Shorncliffe, Brighton, Margate area of our region. So why did we start to work in this area? Really what it came down to was that when we analysed the children not attending kindergarten, what we call NAC data, we were alarmed, and I use the royal we because some of this work was done just as I came to this region. We're alarmed at the number of children who identified as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander not attending a kindergarten program. And in this area, we had one identified kindergarten called Kabingai, what was nearing capacity. And so we had nearly 40 children that we knew of on our census collection that weren't attending the kindergarten area. So when the work was started, I'm going to go through with you what the belief of this work should, or what the underpinning beliefs of this work should capture or be driven by to ensure that we were making a better place for children in this community, but focused primarily on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. The underpinning beliefs are articulated there, but I'm going to go through them one by one. So the first one, what we believed is that the approach that we used in Bramble Bay was built on developing social capital and building on the strengths of that community. One of the things that we knew from the research was that if we continue to plug programs into communities from external sources without the voice of families and children and the community embedded within those programs, then the likelihood of that program being successful is fraught with a bit of danger. The other thing is that the number of programs coming into a community from different government agencies or different government or different funding sources. So when Melissa and I were looking at this work, what we found in the research from the Queensland Productivity Commission in 2017 was that in one of our communities there were 78 different services provided by 46 different service providers across 44 different funding sources, across 22 government agencies to a population of 1,000 people. And so it's this is what we didn't want to do to Bramble Bay. What we wanted to was to draw on the social capital that existed within that community. I have access to skills, expertise, knowledge and information. Knowing that I can't even say that word today, reciprocity is established through social interactions which are based on trust and respect. We couldn't come into these community telling them that they needed to improve the attendance of children at kindergarten. We had to look at what was really happening within that community to enhance the experiences of families. And what we were really wanting to achieve was collective action through cooperation against sector and putting aside power differences within the community. The second thing, what we wanted to do was to actually lead from the ground up. And the number of partners, so as Melissa said, partnerships were crucial. In Bramble Bay, the partnerships were crucial as well to this work. We had Department of Education regional staff, my team. We had early childhood educators, and you're all pivotal to this work. We know that a protective factor for children is the attendance at a kindergarten. We had also early childhood service leaders involved. We actually went across and brought in school teams and teachers, community organisations, as well as elders. And the way that this group of people came together was really from the perspective of a call to action, that we needed to change and how could we do it. This thing does not come together overnight. It takes a long time. If we're talking about relationships based on trust and respect, those two things need to be earned. So there was a lot of work done in the early years, and this program's been going now 4 years, and you'll see this in a minute when I get to those slides, that we're really starting to get a lot of momentum just now after 4 years of implementation. But some of the things that worked in the early years to get to build trust was to have regular meetings that were purposeful, that were culturally safe, and were based on sharing stories, but also keeping in mind what the vision was for that community, and that vision was based on collaboration and capacity building. The third belief was that it was based on the evidence, and this is the compelling evidence facing our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. So in 2015, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are 9.5 times more likely to be removed by child protection authorities than non-Indigenous children. And there's a whole lot of other stats on that page. We know that and if we're projecting forward into 2035, it would triple if no new action was taken. The other bit of evidence that we believed that we needed to embed within the work was understanding the causes, that it came really through from lack of support and poverty. And I'll just let you read some of that information. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we know there's 700 million coming in to communities in terms of family support service funding, but 3.5 billion in terms of child protection system funding. And it would be lovely if we didn't need the child protection system funding, if we could put it into the family service funding. But this was some of the data that we were using as compelling evidence. The other bits of evidence that we were using to underpin our work was the research that came out of the first 1,000 days and the Charter of Rights for Children, as well as understanding the protective factors. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, these included the social connectedness and sense of wellbeing, as well as the connection to land, culture, spirituality and ancestry, living on or near traditional lands. And you'll see coming through the outcomes that have been achieved by this group that these first three are very important, including the last one, to the work in the Bramble Bay. We and our team we are aware that culture is not a perk, that it's an absolute lifeline for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. We want to close the gap. We believe that there has to be, within all of our work, a deep connection to country. We also wanted to acknowledge the personal and professional journey, that it's understanding the lived experience of the people who live in that community. I don't live there. I can't profess to understand what it is like to live in that community. Also where we have come from. And it's around walking alongside our Aboriginal colleagues. One of the strengths of this project was that one of our Aboriginal colleagues within our team identifies as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and she was a really strong advocate for this work and could actually navigate spaces from a cultural perspective that a person with my own ethnic background would find it difficult to navigate. So having the right people come in and partner with us at specific times was crucial. And most of all, it was around using all of this work to ensure that we were being authentic about reconciliation. All right, so how did it work? This is the model. It was about keeping connected through quarterly cluster meetings, providing coaching and support for early childhood services, developing partnerships, development of outdoor classroom days, and having a cultural governance over the project, as well as celebrating. So in 2016, we had the community data story that 36 children who identified were not attending kindergarten. So we partnered with local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services. That was our first key point. From there, the partnership developed into early childhood services and schools. And one of the things that came out very early on, particularly through these partnerships, was that an awareness that we could not go to the families first. If we wanted to improve the percentage of children attending kindergarten, we had to work with the kindergartens in that community to ensure that they were culturally safe before we went and found the families. And that's based on the work of Kagan and Rigby in that the ready equation. If you want a ready child, you need to be ready yourself first to make sure that it is a safe and welcoming community service for that community. And so once that started, there was community visioning, as well as there's a whole of community reconciliation action plan sitting across Bramble Bay. As the partnerships developed and they became more deep and authentic, the services started a lot of work around embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. So there was a lot of crossing culture, professional development provided. And in recognising the work that the services in that area had done, we developed what is known as a Coolamon Award. And I'll come to that in a little minute, and I'll show you that, what a Coolamon is if you haven't seen one. Through part of this work, it's actually amazing. Sometimes it's having a partnership with the local historical society through the council that can give you insights into the community. So the council actually handed over part of the land in that community so that we could develop a connection to country, and it's called the Third Bungwall Lagoon Project. So every school and service provided totems and have created a cultural walk on that land. In 2018, a lot of the work continued. We had our second Coolamon Award, and then all of a sudden we started to get more momentum and we knew that services were embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into the kindergarten, but if we wanted to embed that connection to country, we needed to have outdoor classroom days. So that's where we had now relationships established with our local environmental education centres that historically had only provided services to school-aged children. So they provided bush kindy programs now to kindergarten-aged children. So in 2019, it's building. We're in our third year of the Coolamon Award. The environmental education centres have now hosted professional development, as well as hosted outdoor classroom days, as well as initiating a Little Footprints program for kindergarten aged children. And what we have found now is that the momentum is building outside of this Bramble Bay area. So this culture and community place-based approach is expanding across another 4 locations in our metropolitan region. This is, I'm just going to show you some photos of what I've spoken about and some of the achievements in the final 5 minutes. So quarterly meetings are, the cluster meetings are crucial to this work. But I must say, one of the things that we found, and Melissa would know this as well, that it's not the meeting that's the most important thing, it's the meetings that are happening outside of the meeting that is more crucial to the work. So what we've achieved, and we had 2 children in 2016 only who identified attending a mainstream kindergarten in 2016. In 2019, we increased that to over 30 children. And these 2 photos are some of the photos of the children attending those kindergartens. This is the art trail on the third Bungwell Lagoon project, where all the schools and the services locally developed their totems and had them along the trail. So you can walk on this area and see the local children's artwork in that space. And that led to, it led to a partnership. It was resulted from a partnership with the local council, as well as having a Commonwealth Games grant. These are the outdoor classrooms pulling in the elders. And this is an ongoing annual engagement and event, and it's also partnering with local high schools who release some of the children on the day to provide support for the children. The Nudgee Beach Environmental Centre. This is an outdoor classroom day where local kindergarten children attended. We had, oh, sorry, I didn't put the number in. We've got X services with reconciliation action plans. And one of the reason I put this photo in is it's quite significant for the person who I mentioned earlier, our staff member, Rebecca Johnson. For one of our local services to get them to just to fly the flag was a huge event. And she was driving home from work and saw the flag flying in the distance, and she pulled over, and it brought her to tears. And I think that little story shows how important it is for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to feel welcome and included in their community. This is an example of a NAIDOT week, a display that's put out in one of our local kindergartens. Some of our kindergartens have found it, I'm not going to gloss it, have found it difficult. Some of our kindergartens, parents have expressed, why do we have to do this when we don't have any children who identify in our kindy? But there are many of our kindergartens who have embraced this work because they see it as their part in building reconciliation with the children who are attending their service. It's also about building professional knowledge in the, particularly in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. And this is our little Coolamon. The Coolamon, if you're not aware of it, was a structure used to keep the Jarjums safe. And what we decided was we wanted to acknowledge all the work that our services had undertaken to make their communities, their kindergartens culturally safe. And so this was the award. And I'll just read out to you what Rebecca has said about this. Traditionally used to cradle our Jarjums as well as to carry bush tucker, the Coolamon supported, sorry, can't see that, and cushioned our Jarjums transitions and growth in the early years. This award recognises valuable leadership in embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, empowers improved outcomes and builds cultural capacity in early childhood services. Meaningful ways of creating an inclusive service for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and communities ensures a strong and deadly start to their education journey. The Coolamon Award acknowledges placement of culture, language and community as foundational elements in ensuring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children participate and attend a connected kindergarten. The creation of an environment where children and community feel physically safe, emotionally and spiritually safe to practice culture enhances re-engagement and contributes to a good education. What's interesting is Rebecca is, we're very lucky to have Rebecca in our team. She is a United Nations representative on the rights of our First Nations people and regularly goes over to Geneva to participate in cultural awareness activities. And this is the Coolamon and the Coolamon Award. Each service keeps the Coolamon for 12 months and uses it however way they wish within their early childhood service for that year. All right, so that's it from me. I've spoken quite a lot. Are there any questions? I haven't been able to access the chat, so are there any questions that you would like to ask? I must have done a really good job then. I thought you'd all be a bit full after the buffet lunch that you'd all accessed prior to coming into this session. Yeah. There's a long way to go with this work. You know, we've only focused in on one part. What's happening now within that Bramble Bay area is we're going deeper into 2 communities within the Bramble Bay called Zilmere and Tagum, and they're becoming priority locations. So as part of the Connect for Children strategy. So this was almost a universal approach to building reconciliation and improving participation in kindy. The next bit of work is to go down to that next layer.
Well, thank you for having us, I think.
Yeah. If you've got any questions, follow those links to go and find the regional teams. If you want to visit any of the services or chat to them, we can give you connection points, as well as if you want to know more about the work, we'd love to hear from you. I was amazed, I'm still amazed at times how much pushback we do get from some members of the broader community, but we can all play our part in reconciliation. Pamela, thanks for hosting as well.
That's okay,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you very much for coming on board this year with the Connect for Children, and I'm sure, I know myself, I'll be definitely connecting with the local person here in Rocky, and I'm sure a lot of the other ECTs will be doing the same.